March of 1922. A man steps out of the forest toward a farmhouse. His footprints go in, and they never come back out. Days later, an entire family is found butchered, 6 people, 3 generations killed with a tool from their own farm. But here's the part that turns your blood cold. The killer didn't run. He stayed. He ate their food. He fed their animals. And he lived with the bodies for 3 days. So tonight, we're not just asking who did it. We're asking the question investigators still can't shake: why would a killer stay? This case, one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in history, took place about 70 kilometers north of Munich, near the small hamlet of Kaifeck, on a farm called Hinterkaifeck. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary farmhouse in rural Bavaria, quiet, isolated, and unremarkable. Yet, on the 31st of March 1922, this calm facade shattered into a gruesome scene of horror. The family of 6 living there was brutally murdered, and the killer, after committing the crime, didn't leave. In fact, the killer did something no one expected. He stayed. This wasn't just a murder scene. It was a place where someone kept doing the day-to-day tasks after the people were dead. To understand why this matters, we need to meet the victims, because Hinterkaifeck wasn't simply isolated by geography. It was isolated by reputation. The victims. 6 people lived at Hinterkaifeck. Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, the owner of the farm, hard, controlling, and feared more than liked. Cecilia Gruber, 72 years old, Andreas's wife. Victoria Gabriel, 35 years old, their widowed daughter. Cecilia Gabriel, 7 years old, Victoria's daughter. Joseph Gabriel, 2 years old, Victoria's son. Maria Baumgartner, 44 years old, the new maid who arrived only hours before she was killed. Maria didn't have time to learn the rhythms of the house. She didn't know where the floor creaked, who slammed doors, or which silences were normal. But she walked into a house already steeped in a disturbing history. The Gruber family was haunted, not just by ghosts, but by scandal. In 1915, Andreas Gruber and his daughter Victoria were convicted of incest. Andreas served a year in prison, Victoria served a month. In a small, tight-knit community, scandals like this don't just fade, they linger, fermenting resentment and judgment. Victoria's life only became more complicated after that. Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, was said to have been killed in World War I, but rumors didn't die. By 1919, Victoria had a young son, Joseph. The question that wouldn't go away was, who was the father? The suspicion grows. A neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, at one point claimed he was Josef's father, then denied it, accusing Andreas of continuing the abuse. Yet, oddly, Schlittenbauer agreed to adopt Josef shortly before the murders. Rumors, gossip, and unspoken grudges shaped the perception of what was really happening at Hinterkaifeck, but something much darker was happening before the murders took place. The family was already on edge. Andreas Gruber, 6 months before the murders, had experienced strange occurrences. His previous maid, Crescens Rieger, had quit, citing disturbing noises in the attic footsteps, movement, a presence. Andreas found a newspaper from Munich on his property, one no one in the area claimed to subscribe to. Then there were footprints in the snow, leading from the forest to the farm's machine room. But the chilling detail? No footprints led back out. Someone had come in and vanished. The lock on the machine room door was broken, and the family again heard footsteps in the attic. Andreas investigated but found no one. Yet, despite all these eerie occurrences, Andreas refused help from neighbors. He didn't report it to the authorities. Was he too afraid of the scandal this would bring? Or did he believe he knew who it was? If someone close to you is stalking you, do you call for help or do you hesitate? Then came the day that would change everything. The murders began. On Friday, the 31st of March 1922, Maria Baumgartner arrived at the farm. She didn't know it, but she walked into the last day of her life. That night, sometime after dark, the killer began moving. The murders were methodical. The killer didn't rush. One by one, the family members were drawn into the barn, not in a chaotic rush one by one, as if someone was luring them or someone knew exactly how to separate them. Inside the barn, they were killed with a mattock, a farm tool that belonged to the family. A mattock is not a clean weapon. It's workmanlike, heavy, and intimate. Every strike is a decision you feel in your arms. The victims in the barn included Andreas, his wife Cecilia, Victoria, and little Cecilia, just 7 years old. After the barn killings, the killer went into the house. In the living quarters, 2 more victims died, Maria and little Joseph, who was found in his crib. 6 people gone. The farm should have become a ghost town, but it didn't. The killer stays. Here's where things get chilling. The killer didn't leave. Evidence suggests that the killer stayed at Hinterkaifeck for roughly 3 days. The killer did not panic. The killer didn't flee. He stayed. He ate the food from the pantry. He used the fireplace. He even fed the animals. Now, this might sound like a small detail, but consider it. Feeding the animals isn't a quick, impulsive action. It takes time. It's routine. And more than that, it's domestic. It's the kind of thing you do when you live somewhere, when you belong there, even temporarily. And that's the scariest thing about this case. The killer wasn't panicked. The killer wasn't desperate. The killer was comfortable. The killer had settled in, at least for a while. Why? Was the killer waiting for something? Or was the killer already familiar with the place? The discovery. By the 4th of April 1922, neighbors started to notice the strange silence. The little girl, Cecilia, hadn't shown up at school. The family missed church. Everything had gone quiet. On April 1, coffee sellers stopped by and noticed something odd. The gate to the machine room was open, but no one came out. Then came a mechanic named Albert Hoffman, who spent hours repairing an engine on the farm. He worked for over 4 hours without ever encountering anyone from the house. It's possible the killer was hiding, watching, or perhaps had just left. By the afternoon, a search party was sent out. Among them was Lorenz Schlittenbauer. When they arrived at the farm, they found the bodies, 6 in total. But the crime scene was already compromised. People moved the bodies. They walked through the rooms, some even prepared meals in the kitchen. The lack of proper forensic handling, even by the standards of the time, meant that many crucial details were lost forever. Theories and suspects. In the years following the murders, theories abounded. The family had enemies, the farm had a troubled history, but the primary suspect was Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Schlittenbauer's connection to the family was intimate and complicated. His alleged relationship with Victoria, the adoption of Joseph, and his strange behavior during the search all painted him as a suspect. Schlittenbauer was the one who had a key to the farm, one that had gone missing days earlier. He also seemed to know things about the crime scene that made people uneasy. But Schlittenbauer denied any involvement and pursued slander charges against those who accused him. Other suspects included the Gump brothers, members of far-right paramilitary circles, and even rumors surrounding Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, who might have faked his death in World War I and returned to kill his family. However, these theories never fully materialized. A more modern theory proposed that Paul Mueller, a German migrant linked to axe murders in the US, could have been responsible. But again, this theory lacked solid evidence tying him directly to Hinterkaifeck, the core of the mystery. In the end, we return to the question that has haunted this case for a century. Why would the killer stay? We can speculate on motives, actions, and behaviors, but the most compelling reason the killer stayed is the one that fits the psychological profile best. The killer felt entitled to the farm. This wasn't just a random killing. The killer wasn't an intruder. He was someone who felt he belonged. He knew the routines. He fed the animals. He moved around like a resident. And that's what makes this case so chilling. It wasn't just about death, it was about control. The killer didn't just leave behind a crime scene. They left behind a legacy of fear and suspicion. Hinterkaifeck is a reminder that some crimes aren't solved because they aren't just about facts. They're about behavior, motivation, and human darkness. The farm was demolished in 1923, but the case lives on, haunting Germany and all who encounter it. Conclusion: why would the killer stay? Because, in some twisted sense, the killer wasn't a stranger. The killer was already home.